Welcome to CharityVillage Connects. I'm Mary Barrell. Nonprofits in Canada are notoriously slow when it comes to investing in new technology. Will they be left behind when it comes to the new AI tools that are poised to revolutionize our world? In this episode of CharityVillage Connects, we take a hard look at what AI has to offer nonprofit organizations, as well as its potential drawbacks. Is there a way to responsibly harness the power of AI for social good? To discuss these important issues, please welcome Brendan Howe. Brendan is the CEO and founder of Techify, a technology company specializing in proactive technology, productivity, and cybersecurity driven by data and AI. With over 15 years of experience, Brendan has led Techify to become a leading player in the industry. Brendan's deep knowledge of the nonprofit industry has positioned Techify as a trusted partner in this sector, with nonprofits representing a significant percentage of the company's clientele. Welcome to the podcast, Brendan.
Hey, Mary, thanks for having me. I appreciate it.
Well, I'd like to start with the basics, if you could, please. Can you give us an introduction to AI in plain language for our listeners who may be unfamiliar with it?
Yes, absolutely. Like, we hear AI being used all over the place. And the study of AI, artificial intelligence, has actually been around since 1954. And it is, in fact, just represents any intelligence that is done by computers. Anything that you rely on from a computing basis to do a job, provide you information, that sort of thing. So it comes in all sorts of different shapes and forms.
So why is it in the news so much these days? I mean, as I understand AI, it's not just that it responds to the inputs that are put into it, but it also learns as well because of the data that's put into it. I mean, that's the contemporary understanding, at least, of for the layperson, of what AI is. Could you sort of drill down on that for us?
So absolutely, and it's a great question, Mary, because if you look at the history of AI, it's been around for decades, right? And what has happened is there's been moments in time that have really like captured people's attention and said, wow, like this technology, like the robots could do amazing things for us. Like Watson, IBM's supercomputer, beat chess champion Kasparov, right? And a few years later, it won Jeopardy against two of the biggest Jeopardy champions. And these were like moments that people said, wow, the capability of computers really is quite amazing. And what happened in the fall of 2022, OpenAI, which is an organization based on natural language processing, artificial intelligence, they came out with ChatGPT-4. And what ChatGPT-4 has really done is revolutionize the capability of people to speak in normal language. It's called natural language processing. Speak in normal language to a computer and have a computer understand us. If you think about the history of computing, we're used to having, I need to go hire a coder to be able to speak to the machines because they only understand code and like different, like some sort of crazy language that none of us can understand. Now we can all just speak in plain English and tell a computer what we want it to do. And it's just unlocked this amazing power and this amazing demand. And it's why you see the stock market going crazy for AI companies. It's why all these people are talking about it. And it's been such a significant breakthrough. A lot of times I'll compare it to the launch of e-commerce or Google and how that transformed how we operate on a day-to-day basis and how we do business on a day-to-day basis.
So could you talk about some of the opportunities that exist for nonprofit organizations who embrace AI?
Yeah, so it's a great question, Mary. Nonprofits have a huge opportunity to really embrace AI and do fantastic things with it. So if you think of any manual repetitive process that you do in your organization, there's a good chance that that can be done through artificial intelligence. And the way people work right now in nonprofits is going to go through a revolution. It's going to change dramatically. So think about, here's some examples. People in the near future will rarely create the first draft of a Word document or a proposal themselves. All that time that analysts, finance analysts are used to gathering, interpreting data in Excel, we're gonna be able to have AI do that for us, and we're gonna be able to spend time thinking about what to do with that data, as opposed to spending time gathering the data and analyzing it and putting in graphs and that sort of thing. The ability to fundraise and get deep insights of your potential donors and who to spend time with, how to contact them, best way to contact them, how to raise more money. It's all going to dramatically change. The finance department of nonprofits, the ability. There's a good example where a lot of manual work is being done. Entering invoices, payables, receivables. A lot of it is repetitive processes. And if you think about repetitive processes, there's an opportunity to use technology to either make them much easier or to automate them. At the end of the day, the possibility for AI for nonprofits is it will allow nonprofit leaders and members of their team to do dramatically more and to have such a bigger impact than what they're having right now.
So I guess if we're not future casting and we're looking at real use cases that you might have come across in either the nonprofit or the for-profit sectors right now, how are you seeing this technology implemented that you think would be instructive to nonprofit leaders?
Yes, so there's a whole bunch of ways that people are starting to look at this, and they're starting to look at, all from the concept of, we have limited resources. All nonprofits struggle with limited resources because we have limits on the funding that we have. And so if you have limited resources, you want to enable your people with better tools so they can do more work. So take ChatGPT, for example. You can now use it to create all sorts of content. It can write emails for you. It can write position papers. It can write ebooks. You can use it in your marketing. You can use it to give you a sense of a strategy or a report or an approach. So take the regular kind of person working at a nonprofit that's overburdened by how much work they have to do, that's frustrated because they can't afford to have a couple more staff in their department. There are these tools, starting with ChatGPT, moving very soon to Microsoft Copilot, that are there that they can use, and it make their job a whole bunch easier, allow them to do a lot more with the limited resources they have.
So, as you say, for smaller organizations who may not have the capacity for tech development that some of the bigger organizations do, is it likely we're going to see more AI baked into apps and software that is sort of a plug and play that might make it easier for their day-to-day use, or is there something that could be transformational within their organization? Like, how do your services fit in with those sort of off-the-shelf kind of software that we're hearing about being launched virtually every day now?
Well, I'll start from the beginning, and from the high level. What we find is people's thinking on technology tends to be very reactive. They've been conditioned, nonprofits, for-profits have been conditioned with IT department is there to fix problems. An outsourced IT company is there to fix problems. They'll answer when we ask them to do something, they'll go and ask them to do something. We have a much different value proposition and a different focus. What we find is people's thinking on technology tends to be very reactive. They've been conditioned, nonprofits, for-profits have been conditioned with IT department is there to fix problems. An IT outsourced IT company is there to fix problems. They'll answer when we ask them to do something, they'll go and ask them to do something. We have a much different value proposition and a different focus. And it's around that proactive technology, cybersecurity, and productivity, powered with this data that we have and that we have available to us. And I think if you're looking at technology from a proactive way, then you're developing a technology strategy. You're being much more strategic, and then you're looking at the different applications you use and say, are these future ready? And so what we do is we help nonprofits go through developing those technology strategies, like looking at are these applications you're looking at, are they AI enabled? Are there chat bots in them that can help your team in terms of getting information in, answering queries, getting back to people faster, reducing the overload of email, that sort of thing? We're even looking at what our team is doing a lot right now with different nonprofits is saying, okay, let's look at your infrastructure. I understand that AI is really exciting and that's where you want to go, but we got to look at some boring infrastructure stuff first, because many nonprofits, if they're behind in terms of their modernization of technology, they won't be AI ready. So instead of picking AI applications that they can go off and run off and implement, in some cases, they need to spend some time doing the boring infrastructure stuff first. Get their data in the right place, make sure they're properly utilizing the cloud, make sure they're taking advantage of that tech soup licensing, all that low cost stuff that Microsoft gives nonprofits, and setting themselves up so that they're in the position to be able to turn on AI and just link in to ChatGPT and the AI engines that all these companies are building, and then they can leverage those as part of existing applications they have, and they don't have to create new applications or custom development or stuff like that. They just say, yes, I would like that, and you can go off and implement it.
So you design or you consult with nonprofits to help them. Well, first, I guess you do an assessment to see where they are in their journey in terms of embracing technology to be, I guess, technology ready generally, but then on top of that, AI ready. Could you just sort of lean into that a little bit and give us a bit more detail? How do you work with nonprofits?
Yeah, so Mary, we describe ourselves, we're like an outsourced IT department on steroids. So many IT departments, they have a help desk, they do project work, they've got systems administration people that kind of sit in the dark room and make sure all of the technology works and stuff like that. So we do all the regular stuff that IT folks do, but we've developed a dedicated team and a powerful process that we call techification. And this process is all about going in, looking at nonprofits, looking at their technology, assessing it against our more than 700 best practices, and then looking at areas where they're misaligned to those best practices, helping them build out a technology strategy customized to their nonprofit and where they're going. So for example, if they wanted to use AI and improve the productivity of their team, the output of their team, we would assess their environment against those best practices and say, okay, we need to change this. We need to migrate from your file server to SharePoint. We need to make sure that everybody has the right licensing. We need to make sure everybody has the right computers. We need to do a bunch of stuff on the configuration side. And it's all based on that sort of lens versus best practices. And saying, we know because we have a third of our client base are nonprofits. We manage over 50 different clients around GTA and across the country. And we know what works. So we can take a nonprofit that's sitting there saying, how do I do this? I don't know how I can modernize. I don't know how I can do it cost effectively. I don't want to go and spend $20,000, $30,000, $40,000 and waste it because our resources are so precious. We can come to them and say, okay, this is a best practice. This is what's worked at 50 different organizations. It's worked at a whole boatload of nonprofits. If you implement this, you'll get this result.
So I'd like to take a look at we know that it's a nice, shiny, new software and an idea in terms of AI being this kind of extraordinary tool, but it's not all, pretty flowers and and celebrations. Certainly, there are discussions about some of the problems with AI, at least in its current forms. I wonder if you could sort of outline to our listeners what some of the potential risks or drawbacks that they should be aware of, especially if they're starting to use AI in their work.
Yeah, so I think the risk is one of the biggest risks is the more that we use technology, the more we need to make sure that we are addressing cybersecurity risk, right? So the more we put things in the cloud, the more we put data online, or the more we are interrelating data, and the more we're allowing our staff to work from home or work from the road or work from the coffee shop, that creates an inherent risk. And so if somebody is not being proactive about cybersecurity, then they're going to reactively deal with a breach. They're going to deal with a whole boatload of cybersecurity problems. So one of the biggest risks, the more you go down the road of AI, is a cybersecurity risk. And dealing with those come hand in hand. Folks need to know, where is my data? What are the safeguards on my data? What happens if there's a breach? What's my plan if there's a breach? What am I obligated to do? All that sort of stuff. And regardless of whether you're just operating an organization or getting deeper and deeper into the world of AI, that stuff needs to be in place. So the first thing that I'd look at is the cybersecurity risk. The next thing I look at is the integrity of the organizations you're dealing with. And everybody is starting to get bombarded with companies that are in the AI business. And we will, for the next bunch of years, we're gonna hear about tons and tons of different companies and that are doing all sorts of AI stuff. There's going to be different levels of protection that those folks have about their data, processes in place, where that data is located, how it's managed, how ethically they approach your data and AI practices and stuff like that. And it would be really important for nonprofit leaders to assess that and get an understanding of what protections are in place.
And what do you think about potential ethical issues around using AI in, for example, communications with donors, in the reputational risks that might happen if there's not full disclosure that AI is being used for certain things? Like, there's got to be those kind of ethical and reputational risks that are also significant, especially for nonprofits that, face a higher level of expectations in terms of trust from the public.
There are definitely ethical risks. There's lots of talk. Like, if you look online, maybe a little bit too much talk, but there's lots of talk about all the potential bad things that could happen with AI and what could happen when the machines and the robots start having too much control and stuff like that. Probably the best piece of advice that I could give any nonprofit leader is have a mindset that AI is going to be your co-pilot. So for your staff, for your organization, AI will be your co-pilot. It will not be your autopilot. So if it's your autopilot, it might go off and do some stuff that you don't want it to do. If it's your co-pilot and it's supporting your team, it's doing the first draft of your Word documents or proposals, it's doing the first draft of your Excel or your PowerPoint presentations, or the first draft of your emails for you. It's saving a bunch of time, but a member of your team is looking at that and making sure, is that appropriate? Are we using the data correctly? Are we speaking to the donor in a respectful way? And the more you have that mentality that this AI stuff, when used the best, it helps our teams go from a week of work down to a couple hours of work for a task. But it doesn't replace our teams. It sits next to them and flying the plane and helps them see what's coming and helps them do the work and that sort of thing, and helps them be way more successful and way more effective.
And so I guess in that sort of environment where you're integrating AI in your day-to-day operations, there's the old phrase, garbage in, garbage out. I mean, AI is reliant on data, the quality of the data, the integrity of the data, the capacity to presumably analyze what AI does with that data in its output is also key to using it effectively and appropriately, so that it supplements what we do as opposed to inherently damages us at our work. Am I explaining this correctly?
So absolutely, Mary, bang on. Do you remember the time, maybe you're too young, but you remember the time when we all had to learn how to Google? Like you could go to a search engine and you could type in a bunch of stuff and you didn't get the result you want. And then eventually we learned what the right search terms were and how to put queries in. And then it got easier. Google figured out how to make it easier. But when it first started, we all had to figure out how to interact with search engines. Well, it's the same way with AI. And what a skill, the skill in terms of how to interact with AI, what prompts to use, how to teach AI to give you relevant information, how to detect biases, how to look for biases. These are all going to be new skills that people are going to need and kind of in the future. So you can't just walk up to ChatGPT and say, ChatGPT, write me a proposal to raise a bunch of money from big bank number 4. If you give no context, if you don't train what your nonprofit's value proposition is, what you're trying to do, what you're best at, and you don't spend the time, it's like bringing in a consultant and saying, I'm not going to spend any time, I'm not going to train you anything about my organization, but I want you to do fantastic work. So those are all skills that we're all going to have to learn in order to be relevant as technology progresses.
Well, it's very kind of you to suggest that. I would be too young to not remember that, but I do remember that very clearly, that time in history. Can you talk a little bit more about the barriers that organizations in the nonprofit sector might face when attempting to implement AI technology? There very well might be psychological barriers and mindset barriers, not just technological ones.
Yeah, I think the two barriers, and you hit them in your question. Barrier number 1 is people. Barrier number 2 is the technology that they have in place. So let's talk about the people side of things. The biggest challenge with any technology change is always the people, right? What's between the keyboard and the chair? That's any good software implementation comes with a change management plan, with training, with communicating the goals, all that sort of thing. And so you can't put an AI implementation on autopilot. You can't just expect that everybody's going to pick it up and everybody's going to learn. And you have to build trust with your people. So what we did internally in our company is, and we're doing this on a regular basis with clients, we're echoing that this is about having a co-pilot. This is about helping you deal with the weight of your workday, the overwhelm of all these emails and Teams messages and calls and meetings, and like there's some great research that we go through in our AI presentations that shows a high email user spends over 8 hours a week just on email, almost 8 hours a week just in meetings. So 57%, the average person spending about 57% of their time just on communicating, chat messages, emails, online like video meetings and stuff like that. So we've gotten to the point where our people are spending so much time just communicating, they're spending so little time creating, and the creating is what really drives us, what gives us the energy and what gets people excited about their jobs. So if you can show people where you're going and paint that vision and saying the reason we need to get this new technology, get this AI in place is because it's going to co-pilot you to success, and it's going to reduce that overwhelm. It's going to reduce the issues. And then the technology side of things, somebody needs to be giving you that advice to make sure that you're using the right applications, you're using the right platforms, they're in the right place. I tell a story on a regular basis about I was on a call with some people who said, we want to use AI. I said, great, okay, let me ask you some questions. What accounting system are you using? And they're like, oh, Sage, whatever. Okay, where's your data located? We use this file server and people remotely VPN into it and blah, blah, blah. And I asked them a bunch of other questions. And then one of the guys in the call interrupts me. He says, why are you asking us all this stuff? We're here to talk about AI. We don't want to talk about this other stuff. We want to talk about AI. And I said to him, I understand you want to talk to AI, but you talk about AI and you want to implement it and you want to do all the fun stuff that comes with AI. But unfortunately, you're not ever going to be able to get there if you don't deal with the boring stuff, that you've got an accounting system that's 10 versions out of date and it's on premise. You're using an old version of file server technology. You should have your data in SharePoint. If you don't address that boring infrastructure stuff, you'll try and implement the fun AI stuff and you're going to be stopped dead in your tracks because you'll never be able to do that. And that's the situation so many nonprofits are in, that they've reactively dealt with their IT, and if it's not on fire, then they've let it be, and they've created a bunch of technical debt that now they need to go and modernize to be able to set themselves up to properly use. Like, what we all want to do is just kind of click a button and turn on the robots, turn on the AI, give me that co-pilot, do my job for me, make it easy for me, right? But if your data is not in the right place, you're not using the right applications, you'll never be able to just click a button and turn that on. And the danger here for a nonprofit is you wake up 2 years from now and you realize that all the people that are putting in funding requests to the government, they're using amazing technology and they're demonstrating their capabilities and how much they can impact, that they can have with government funding. You don't have that capability to demonstrate that internally, and you're not going to get the funding because folks start looking at it saying, oh, we want to work with innovative organizations. We want to work with people that are really getting the money's worth out of taxpayers' money, from funds, from that sort of stuff. And if you're not thinking about AI now, you could wake up 2 years from now and be in for a really rude awakening.
So it sounds like even if you are thinking about AI and you're, gung-ho about implementing it in your organization, you might very well be facing a reality check when you start actually taking those steps, in terms of your own assessing your own capabilities in the technology front. Could you, we talked a little bit about the cybersecurity considerations and risks that organizations could face. I wonder if you could talk about are there any legal risks or insurance related risks or even HR related risks that you have to think about when you're thinking about embracing AI as a key part of your organization's toolkit?
I think, like, from a legal perspective, obviously you want to talk to your lawyer, your HR professional, your accountant, your bookkeeper, everybody that gives you advice and see the risks. I think to me, as long as you are dealing with things proactively, if you're making decisions focused on the greater good of your organization, and you're dealing with things ethically, we haven't come across kind of big legal concerns that we've seen yet, right? If you have a privacy policy, if you have a privacy officer, if you're being careful about your data, if you're being proactive about your cybersecurity so that you don't have kind of simple data breaches and stuff like that. Like, if you're not, stuff like, you got to be careful what your team is doing and interacting with AI, that it's clear what information are you okay with sharing to analyze, what information are you not sharing. If you're going to use Microsoft Copilot, for example, that's based on the Microsoft Graph and Microsoft 365. And there's all sorts of privacy and security around that. If you're using ChatGPT and OpenAI, there's been some concerns about kind of as ChatGPT learns more about your organization, more about your business, how's that going to be shared? How's that going to be shared with the world? And these are concerns we've been here before, right? Google's mission used to be to organize the world's information and make it publicly accessible for everybody. So like if you had your most confidential Excel documents in the Google Cloud, how do you feel about that mission? Probably not very good, right? They've since kind of changed it. But we have to be kind of cognizant of this, and it comes back to me knowing where your data is going to be, where it is, how it's going to be used, what the policies are, what's the privacy policy, what are you expected to have as an organization, and what happens if there's a breach.
Right. I guess it's normal and part of life that the law tends to drag slowly behind technological innovation. It's awfully hard for it to catch up. And these things tend to take a long time before we find out the real risks from a legal perspective. But I think it is helpful for you to sort of outline, as you have, the risks related to the kind of information, the data that a lot of nonprofits are dealing with, which includes potentially clients that are part of their mission work. It could be potentially donors and their private banking information, all that sort of data that might be key to how nonprofits operate may well be the kind of data that would be used in the AI software applications that you're referring to, is it not?
It definitely can, and it will be, and that's not necessarily a bad thing. Like if you have, there's all sorts of use cases where applications are taking PHI, personal health information, and they're analyzing it and coming up with some trends and some recommendations and that sort of thing that physicians wouldn't see, or they wouldn't see it as clearly. I have this ring that takes my heartbeat and analyzes my sleep and gives me that information and stuff like that. And so there's all these use cases all over the place where it's taking private data, and if you're being, as a nonprofit leader, if you're being proactive about your technology strategy and thinking about, okay, we want to implement this, then you're involving your privacy person, right? You're looking at those, but it shouldn't be full stop, we're going to stay away from this and we're going to disconnect everything from the internet and we're going to run away from it. But they're really good questions and they need to be asked as part of a technology strategy. What kind of privacy is in place? Where's the data located? What happens if there's a breach? What is being done with my data? How can you secure it? How can you make sure that it's not all this personal data that I'm trusting you with, if it's a cloud provider, is not gonna get out on the internet and not gonna be sold for profit, all that horrible stuff.
So I'd like to do a little bit of crystal ball gazing, and specifically using your expertise in sort of sharing your views or your vision with the audience about what you see the future that AI could bring to the nonprofit sector.
Well, I'm excited to answer that question, Mary. I think when you look at the future, there's so much about the future that we have no idea, right? And I was just reading a book about microchips and what the first semiconductors that were put together versus the ones that are in place right now in our phones. Nobody would have ever thought that we could have had all these chips in a mobile phone and be able to do what we can in a mobile phone. And it's like the future is amazing, if people look at this from a strategic, from a proactive way, you could look at, there's so many ways a nonprofit can punch above their weight by utilizing this technology, right? So what if you didn't need as many resources in the back office to do administrative or accounting function? How could you reassign those resources somewhere else to have impact to your nonprofit's mission? What if it didn't take as much effort to fundraise? The fundraising cost wasn't as big. What if the service delivery cost? What if you could much more efficiently deliver services to your clients, patients, people that you support and you work with, because you're leveraging this technology? What if you could do twice as much with the same number of people? What would be the impact on that? This is all the type of stuff that people are going to be able to do. Here's another example. What if instead of having a situation that most nonprofits have, that they have data in all of these different locations all over the place? I got data in an accounting system. I've got data in a government funding system. I've got data on a server. I've got a database over here. What if all that data, you could pull it together in a meaningful way so that you knew really what was going on with your organization and you have insights? And instead of spending time gathering the data or spending time kind of making guesses, you could spend the time acting, data-driven insights, and acting and doing some really high-level decision-making. And you gave all of your staff access to that data so that they could be better in their jobs. And then you started to figure out how to use machine learning models that would take that data and further support the team, further support the mission of your organization. That's the kind of place we're going. And we used to talk about, oh, maybe this is 5 or 10 years off. When I talk to people, I say, if you decide not to do anything today, you're going to wake up 2 years from now and you're going to be really upset because you're going to be so far behind. You're going to be looking at other nonprofits and you're going to see how they're leveraging AI and data to do amazing things for their clients and for their organizations and support their staff. You're going to see that people in your organization want to go work at those places because they better support their team, and they've given them this fantastic technology so that they can achieve the mission and they don't have to do all that drudgery work. If you haven't done anything in 2 years on AI, you're going to spend a whole bunch of time dealing with cybersecurity breaches, while other nonprofits won't spend a minute on it because they've employed more advanced technology to protect them against it. I could go on and on. There's so much opportunity out there, but if inaction is going to be really costly. Anybody that decides, you know what, this is expensive, or I don't understand technology, or there's too big of a risk, or whatever other reason, that inaction will be way more expensive than what it's going to cost you to jump on this and look at ways that you can use AI in your organization.
Well, just to wrap up, I'd love to give you an opportunity to share with our listeners any final words of advice, but that sounds like great advice that you've just mentioned, or any resources that you can suggest for organizations who want to learn more.
Yeah, so I'll give a little bit of a pitch for our thought leadership stuff, if that's okay. We do monthly webinars. So techify.ca, you'll see our webinars. We do monthly training, and the goal, much like your organization, the goal is to educate people on what they can do. We educate people in a very non-technical way. We don't talk in ones and zeros. And we know that everybody's busy and they don't have time to do kind of deep dives into understanding natural language processing models and which one should I do and how I should do this and stuff like that. So we give a lot of use case examples of how people can use technology more effectively. And so we do webinars. We usually do a quarterly in-person event. We got lots of stuff on blogs on our website. Microsoft is also putting out lots of good information. We find a lot of people get value from us kind of interpreting that information and interpreting it for nonprofits or for other industries and stuff like that. But I definitely start there. I do all sorts of speaking and that sort of stuff at different events, and I'm always happy to do stuff like this. We give away a boatload of advice because we just want to help people. We want to leave people feeling smarter and fired up about what the opportunity is with technology.
Well, Brendan, I want to thank your very plain language explanation for me and for all the listeners out there on what AI is and how it could support nonprofits across Canada. I'm sure that nonprofit leaders across the country will benefit from your insights into AI and all of your expertise working with other nonprofit organizations. Thank you for joining us on Charity Village Connects.
Thanks, Mary.